The purpose of Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act training is to ensure compliance with federal, state, and local regulations regarding hazardous chemical management. It equips personnel to safely store, handle, and report toxic substances to protect communities from accidents and facilitate effective emergency responses. The Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act of 1986 was authorized to help communities plan for chemical emergencies. This essentially is a public policy version of the Workplace Right to Know standards guiding hazard communications. It requires industries to report on the storage, use, and releases of certain chemicals to federal, state, tribal, territorial, and/or local governments. It also requires these reports to be used to prepare for and protect their communities from potential risks. Before delving deeper, there are some key terms and concepts that must be understood. A substance is considered a hazardous chemical if Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, requires a safety data sheet, or SDS. It may also be an extremely hazardous substance, or EHS, if it is listed in 40 CFR Part 355, Appendix A or B. Another concept that must be understood is Threshold Planning Quantity, or TPQ. It is the minimum amount of an extremely hazardous substance present at a facility that requires a company to notify state and local authorities for emergency planning. TPQs vary from chemical to chemical, so you will need to check each one. Here is the initial information you will need to know to determine threshold planning quantities and to ensure EPCRA compliance. The names of the chemicals stored at the facility. Their assigned chemical abstract service, or CAS number. If they are hazardous chemicals or extremely hazardous substances, and what their threshold planning quantities are. This will drive the organization's responsibility in reporting the presence of the chemical to the surrounding community to ensure compliance with EPCRA. And the maximum quantity present at the facility, in pounds, at any time during the previous calendar year. Later in this video, the process of converting container weights into pounds will be introduced. Tier 2 chemical reporting is an annual requirement under Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, Section 312, for facilities storing hazardous chemicals above specific thresholds. Reports must be submitted to the State Emergency Response Commission, or SERC, Local Emergency Planning Committee, or LEPC, and local fire department by March 1 for the previous calendar year. Key information for Tier 2 reporting includes the name of the chemicals on hand, the maximum amounts that can be present during a year, the storage locations, and emergency contacts, both internally and externally. For Tier 2 reporting purposes, chemicals are looked at as non-extremely hazardous substances, extremely hazardous substances, or fuel. Non-extremely hazardous substance is a hazardous chemical but is not categorized as an EHS if it is required to have an SDS under OSHA's Hazardous Communication Standard, and it is at or above 10,000 pounds. A chemical is classified as an extremely hazardous substance if it is required to have an SDS under OSHA's Hazardous Chemical Standard. On the list of lists or 40 Code of Federal Regulations Part 355, Part A or B. And over the threshold planning quantity or 500 pounds, whichever is less. For gasoline or diesel, it is reportable if it is stored in underground storage tanks containing over 100,000 gallons of diesel or over 75,000 gallons of gasoline, or stored in above-ground tanks over 10,000 pounds. For chemical inventory purposes, it is important to note that for underground storage the measurement is in gallons, and for above ground, it is in pounds. Now that you have been introduced to how the information is used, next we will discuss chemical inventories and using them to aid in the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act reporting requirements. The purpose of a chemical inventory is to create a detailed list of all chemicals in a facility to ensure workplace safety, achieve regulatory compliance, like OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard, and improve operational efficiency by tracking usage, preventing waste, and enabling quick responses during emergencies. The OSHA Hazard Communication Standard, that is governed through 29 CFR 1910.1200, requires employers to identify, label, and communicate workplace chemical hazards to employees through training, safety data sheets, and a written program. Aligned with Global Harmonization Standard, it ensures that workers have the right to know about chemical risks, as well as supporting compliance with EPCRA. When conducting a chemical inventory, it is important to look for anything that could contain chemicals, which are those substances that will have a safety data sheet. This includes fuel storage containers, office, storage, cleaning, and maintenance areas, flammable cabinets, compressed gas cylinders, and batteries, both in vehicles and equipment, as well as spares that may be stored for future use. It may be helpful to consult with purchasing, operations, and maintenance supervisors on what is procured, used, and stored. While completing the physical inventory, it is important to collect the following information: the manufacturer's name, the product's name, the container size, including the unit of measurement such as ounces, fluid ounces, gallons, etc., and the number of containers on hand. The next step is to count the total number of units for each product found, and multiplying that by the amount in each container. For example, if you count 7 1-gallon gasoline cans, there would be a total of 7 gallons of gasoline. Likewise, if there are 36 12-ounce cans of spray paint, there is a total of 432 ounces. And if there are 4 fuel storage tanks that hold 552 gallons, then the inventory total would be 2,208 gallons. The form the chemical inventory will be documented on is typically a version of a threshold determination summary. The form may have a different name, but its methodology will generally be the same. Across the top, there is a row with criteria of information to be captured during this process. And below, there are sections for each category of chemicals that may be found in the facility or at the worksite. Over the next several minutes, this system for documenting the process will be introduced. This method will help ensure compliance with EPCRA standards. The first 5 columns report the specific information that was collected during the physical chemical inventory. The columns include manufacturer, product or common name, CAS number, container size, and units that the container is measured in. Under the manufacturer column, enter the producer's name. Here in the example it is Chevron. Then in the product name block, the specific product information will be entered. Here it is Dello 15W40 heavy-duty diesel engine oil. The CAS number can be found on the product safety data sheet or by conducting a Google search. CAS numbers are assigned to individual chemicals, and many of the products used will have multiple chemicals. Since the purpose of this process is to evaluate whether reporting thresholds are met, the CAS number is only important if the product contains an extremely hazardous chemical, and thresholds are breached. In the next block, enter the container size, followed by the units it is measured in. For the example engine oil, it is 5 gallons. The next column is where the physical count of each product found during the inventory is entered. During the inventory, there were 12 5-gallon buckets of the Chevron diesel engine oil. Then the average and maximum stored quantities will be entered. Notice that the quantities must be in gallons, which may require conversions if the container is in fluid ounces, liters, quarts, cups, etc. For our example, if you have 12 5-gallon buckets of engine oil, there would be a total of 60 gallons. When the first inventory is conducted, the average and maximum amounts will be the same because there is not more information available. When additional inventories are completed throughout the year, these numbers will likely be adjusted. The totals will be averaged by adding all the results of each inventory and divided by the number of inventories completed for the average stored quantity. The maximum quantity will be the largest quantity found during any one inventory during the year. Specific gravity is a measure of the ratio of mass of a given volume of material at 23 degrees Celsius to the same volume of deionized water. This information is especially important to know when working in or around water because the specific gravity tells us if a chemical will sink or float if it makes it into a water system. The specific gravity can be found in Section 9 of the product's SDS. Sometimes it will be listed as density. Additionally, it can be found by running a Google search. Here the specific gravity for Chevron Delo 15W40 heavy-duty diesel engine oil is 0.873 kg per liter. Notice this is reporting using metric measurements. To convert for gallons, first we must know that the standard is 1 kg per liter is equal to 8.345, and as you can see the number continues, but for our purposes, we will use 8.345. The specific gravity of the Chevron oil is 0.873. These two numbers will be multiplied to convert it into pounds. Therefore, the specific gravity becomes 7.285 pounds per gallon. Next, the average and maximum stored quantities are factored again. This time in pounds. The formula for calculating this is by multiplying the number of gallons by the specific gravity, or density, of the product. For the Chevron engine oil, we found the specific gravity to be 7.285, and there were 60 gallons found during the inventory. This means the current stored quantity is 437 pounds. Like the previous time this was encountered, if this first inventory conducted, the average and maximum amounts will be this calculated amount. If additional inventories are completed, these numbers may be adjusted. The totals will be averaged by adding all the results of each inventory and divided by the number of inventories completed. The maximum quantity will be the largest quantity found during any one inventory. The next column is for an identification of the storage location. The location is the physical site where the product is. If the inventory is done in a building, identify the building and the specific location within it on the form. If it is in a general work site, then list that place. In addition to capturing this information for EPCRA purposes, noting the location will help as a reference during future inventories. Before moving forward, the rest of products in the category must be filled in. Here, 8 1-gallon jugs of Exxon oil, 3 gallons of Cat engine oil, and 10 20-ounce containers of Power Care oil have been added to the inventory list. The specific gravities are calculated, and quantities in pounds are entered on the form. These totals are added together to give us the total average and maximum stored quantities. In this example, it would be 528 pounds. This brings us back to reporting thresholds. The reporting threshold will need to be determined for the product category. This will be identified for single component products or products that have a high concentration of an extremely hazardous substance as a component. The EPA's list of lists will be used to make this determination. Google can also be used to find the reporting threshold for chemicals. As was introduced earlier, the typical category reporting thresholds are extremely hazardous substances that typically have a 500-pound threshold. A hazardous chemical usually has a 10,000-pound threshold. An above-ground fuel storage is 10,000 pounds, and 75,000 gallons of gasoline or 100,000 gallons of diesel fuel stored underground. The next two columns acknowledge whether extremely hazardous substances are present, and if so, at what percentage. This information can be found under Section 15, Regulatory Information on an SDS. Here is that section for Chevron Delo 15W40 heavy-duty diesel engine oil. It shows that there is no EHS present in the product, since it is not identified on the SDS. An N will be entered in the EHS present block. And since there is no EHS present, N will be entered in the % of EHS block for not applicable. To aid in recognizing the presence of an extremely hazardous substance, here is an example safety data sheet for ammonia. It shows that it is present at 100%, and its threshold planning quantity is 500 pounds, while its reporting quantity is 100 pounds. If these thresholds are breached, they must be communicated as part of the annual EPCRA report. The last three columns recognize the EHS maximum stored quantity, EHS reporting thresholds, and whether or not it is reportable in compliance with 40 CFR Part 355 and the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act standards. The maximum stored quantity can be pulled from the total maximum stored quantity column if the product is fully made up of the EHS. If the EHS is a component of the overall product, then the maximum stored quantity will be multiplied by the percentage of the EHS. For example, if the maximum stored quantity is 100 pounds, and the percentage of EHS for that product is 32%, then the total maximum stored quantity will be 32 pounds. The EHS reporting threshold will be marked with a yes if the threshold is crossed. For example, if a facility has 15,000 pounds of gasoline in an above-ground storage container, then the threshold will have been passed. If the threshold is exceeded, the last column labeled report would be marked yes. Or if it is not exceeded, then it would be marked no. Again, this information can be found on the safety data sheet. To complete the example, the first two columns are NA, and no will be entered in the report column. Batteries on site are another Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act consideration. Under EPCRA Sections 311 and 312, facilities must report lead-acid batteries and some lithium-ion batteries if they exceed specific weight thresholds. Some threshold considerations are: sulfuric acid. If the total sulfuric acid in all batteries exceeds 500 pounds, reporting is required. Inventory time. Thresholds are based on the maximum amount present at any one time. In safety data sheets, facilities must maintain SDS for these batteries and make them available. To determine the amount of sulfuric acid in a lead-acid battery, multiply the total weight of the battery by the weight percentage of the electrolyte, as stated in safety data sheet. Here you can see Section 3 of a battery's safety data sheet. For the purposes of the inventory, the line with battery electrolytes and sulfuric acid are what you will need to find. This information can be reported on the Threshold Determination Summary spreadsheet or on a separate tracker. The information to be captured on this type of report includes the equipment number. If there is a company-specific number, use that. Another option is to enter the serial number. If it is rental equipment, it may be sufficient to enter rental in this block. In the description of technical object block, enter the type of equipment it is. Then enter the location of the equipment. Next, enter the battery type being inventoried. For equipment batteries, it may be easiest to contact the department's or area's mechanic. The number of batteries used by the piece of equipment is entered in the number of batteries block. The percentage of sulfuric acid that was found on the safety data sheet will be captured in the next block, followed by the wet weight of the battery. To calculate the estimated acid weight, divide the percent of sulfuric acid by 100 to turn the number into a percentage, and then multiply that by the wet weight of the battery. So if the sulfuric acid percent is 38, and dividing it by 100 gives you 0.38. A battery with a weight of 44 pounds has an estimated acid weight of 16.72. And lastly, the calculation for total estimated acid weight is equal to the estimated acid weight for one battery multiplied by the number of batteries. So if the estimated acid weight is 16.72 and there are 2 batteries in the equipment, then the total estimated acid weight would be 33.44. When this process is completed, the Threshold Determination Summary spreadsheet would be saved and maintained as an official record. It may be required to submit it to the safety or environmental managers. Remember, chemicals exceeding thresholds must be reported to the appropriate entity by March 1 each year. Chemical inventories are an important component of the environmental program to ensure compliance with EPCRA regulations and to protect the communities that are worked in. Use the guidance provided in this training to complete the inventories. And if you have questions about your specific requirements, you should contact your environmental manager. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to access additional videos and get alerts when new content becomes available.